Hey y'all, I have a poem for you today. It's one of my favorite poems of all time. It's by a guy named Christian Wiman. It's in a collection called Every Riven Thing. Actually, the poem I'm going to read you is the title poem called Every Riven Thing. And here goes. God goes belonging to every riven thing he's made. Sing his being simply by being the thing it is. Stone and tree and sky, man who sees and sings and wonders why God goes. Belonging to every riven thing he's made means a storm of peace. Think of the atoms inside the stone. Think of the man who sits alone trying to will himself into a stillness where God goes belonging. To every riven thing he's made, there is given one shade shaped exactly to the thing itself. Under the tree, a darker tree. Under the man, the only man to see. God goes belonging to every riven thing. He's made the things that bring him near. Made the mind that makes him go. A part of what man knows, apart from what man knows. God goes belonging to every riven thing he's made. There's so many things I love about that poem. The rhyme scheme is just clever and lovely. And there's lots of kind of subtle things happening with just the kind of echoes and consonants and things like that. Just rhythmically, it's a pleasing poem to say out loud. But that central line that he plays with, God goes belonging to every riven thing he's made. It's kind of towing this middle line between God's presence and God's absence, I think. It hits kind of right in the middle of the space that I feel like I live a lot of my life in. God's kind of overwhelming realness and God's sometimes overwhelming absence. That there is, depending on how you look at it, looking at a stone, the thing that is most solidly itself and not something that you would ever even think about when thinking about God's presence with us. He says, inside the stone, think of the atoms inside the stone. That God is present to us in active ways because there's atoms moving inside of something that is solidly and stubbornly itself. And that same God is present to us in something else. Think of the man who sits alone trying to will himself into a stillness where God goes belonging. Here is a man who is decidedly and specifically feeling God's absence, trying to will himself into feeling God's presence. And even there, even though it's unbeknownst to the man who's trying to will himself into that space of belief, God goes on belonging. God is present inside of even the atoms in him. There's a kind of, in a way, it's a kind of depressing poem, or it covers lots of kind of discouraging ground, but the hope in it is that regardless of what we feel, regardless of whether we're conscious of God's presence or not, God goes on belonging to every riven thing he's made. That last pair of lines, a part of what man knows, apart from what man knows, God goes belonging to every riven thing he's made. That actually God's decision to belong to us has nothing to do with our momentary capacity to believe that God's there or not. God just goes on belonging to us. And God goes on belonging to every riven thing he's made, every broken thing that he's made, that there is an acknowledgement of the brokenness. That God, even though we're broken, even though the world is broken, even though we make mistakes, that God goes on belonging to us. The rivenness, the brokenness, doesn't have an effect on God's ultimate decision to belong to us, a decision that we see made manifest in Jesus Christ. One of my favorite theologians, Karl Barth, says, in Jesus we see God's decision never to be, but to be for us. God's decision never to be, but to be for us. That God's decision to belong to us is something that is at the very core of God's self-identity, God's self-understanding. So though covering some kind of complex kind of ground of belief and not belief, it's a poem that gives me hope because it outlines God's solid and stubborn, almost, belonging to us. So that's my offering for today. For our Pass the Peace project. It's been lovely to continue to see all the ways that you are passing the peace to one another and to those around you. And so I will see you later. Peace.